What's up, everyone? It's your favorite optometrist, Dr. Darryl Glover. Today is Friday, and today I am very excited because I get to hang out with one of my friends, one of my colleagues that I really love and adore and that I really respect because he's just a man that has all the answers. But most importantly for me, he's a man of faith. And when it comes to collaborating and partnering with folks, this is the type of colleagues that I love to collaborate and party with. Friends and family, I like to welcome the man himself, Dr. Ted. How you doing today, man?
I'm great, Darryl. I'm very, very pleased to be here. This is very exciting for me now to get to return the favor of being on your podcast and thing. It's a blast, man. This is for me. This is a Friday afternoon of fun.
You know what? I agree with you, and I'm really excited today because I've known you for how many years now? Has it been about 4 or 5 now? It's
Yeah,
been
at
quite a
least
bit
that
of
long.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know we for those that are listening and wondering how did we meet, we met I believe at a board meeting for Essilor, I believe, in the past, right?
that's right. That's right.
And ever since then we've just always kept communication and I've always followed you and just looked up to you as an optometrist just simply because you're full of knowledge and you really have the pulse of what's going on in the industry, which is always good to have folks like you close by so you can know what's happening.
Well, it's like I'm looking in a mirror here, Darryl. I mean, what can I say? I mean, you know, it's honestly, I mean, because while we have a lot of very different attitudes about a lot of things, we have a lot of very huge similarities, which are so much more than some of the differences we have. And I just have a blast every time we're around each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, before we get started, I always like for all my guests to just give a background of who they are, where they're from, maybe share something about the family, and just where you practice in general. So, if you don't mind, just sharing a little bit about who you are.
Okay, I am. My name's Ted McElroy, as Darryl has said. I am a rural optometrist. For those of you that don't know what rural is, that's everything outside of your big old city that you live in. I am in a town called Tifton, Georgia, which is also known as not Atlanta. Um, I'm about 168 miles south of Atlanta, which we're actually closer to Florida than we are Atlanta.
Okay.
The community is about 25,000 people. The county itself is maybe about 10,000 plus more. We've got a drawing area, though, of about 60,000 people with the counties that surround us. And in this little small town, there are 8 eye doctors. Um, yeah, and 4 of
Interesting.
them are ophthalmologists. So,
Okay.
we've got a pretty diverse group of eye care here in town, which is very unusual for a small town this size. But we have a major interstate going north and south and a major highway going east and west. So it's a lot of traffic coming through this little community. I've been here since 1993. So that would be 28 years, and I've been married to my wife the same amount of time. My wife, Kristen, I met her in optometry school at Southern SEO,
Nice.
and she was not an OD. She was going to Memphis State. And I was telling the story actually to a colleague of mine today who was wanting to know kind of how I ended up getting down here. And I said, well, I mean, I, I met my wife in school, but it wasn't in optometry school. She was actually at Memphis State, and she was a Sigma Chi little sister, and I'm a Sigma Chi fraternity member.
Okay.
And I had met her at a function because a friend of mine that I had met there in Memphis that was a Sigma Chi from Memphis had invited me to come by, and we just sort of met, and we dated almost my entire time in optometry school.
Wow.
Moved to South Georgia. We're married for about 5 years. I was in practice with an ophthalmologist here in town who had retired, and then bought another practice of an optometrist here in town who had been in practice for a long, long time. And his name was Dr. Robert Coleman. Fantastic doctor. Taught a lot of really important things to me as we were doing the transition, which was great. Being in a small town, you know a lot of people, and they know a lot about you. So it's you one of the questions I saw you pop me through earlier was about networking, and I'm sure we're going to get into that. But that's
Oh
probably
yeah.
the biggest thing I learned when networking was these small towns. You got to you really truly
Yeah.
have to build relationships with people, and that's what it really came down to. My practice, I've had we're in a little over 4,000 square feet. Gosh, I'm getting way into the weeds here. I've got a absolutely fantastic associate that I'm hoping to turn into a partner very soon. In
Nice.
fact, we're hoping to sign the ink on this thing before the end of the year. Her
Okay.
name is Julia Harrison. She's been with me for 3 years, and it's a great relationship. It's kind of like having my daughter working with me. She's much junior to me, and I have a son who's in optometry school that you've met.
I got to
When you
meet
got
him.
that's right. You went up to
Yeah,
Pikeville a little bit ago
yeah,
and got a chance to meet him. Well, actually, you met him before that, but you met him again there in Pikeville.
yeah.
And so that's my family. Oh, I got a son also in Orlando who is working with a restaurant at downtown Disney. He has a degree in hospitality management, and my wife is an educator, and she's coming home for work sometime soon. So
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, that's a great story. Love that you practice rural optometry, and I really want to dive a little bit more into that. But before we get into that, let's kind of take a couple steps back, and I'd love to know your story. Like, how did you get into optometry? What was the exposure? What made you say, "I want to be an optometrist. I want to be able to help people see"? What was that determining factor? How did that play out in your life?
well, part of it was, I mean, I had been going to the eye doctor since I was like 6.
Okay.
My dad was quite nearsighted at a very early age. He had gotten glasses at a very early age, so I started seeing the eye doctor very early as well. By the time I'm 9 years old, I'm already a one diopter myope and wearing glasses, and the cascade just starts rolling from there. I ended up eventually being a 4+ or 4 - 4 plus diopter myope and with some cylinder, and then I had a colleague of mine who was working with an ophthalmology group that was doing LASIK up in Atlanta. They were looking for their 40,000th procedure, and I became that guy. And so it's that part of it was just a sidetrack. But as far as truly getting an optometry, I guess because I've always had this need to want to see better and getting that blessing of seeing better and then wanting to also help other people see was really what got me into it. I knew I wanted to do something in healthcare. I didn't really want to spend my entire life going to school. I also didn't really want to be cutting on anybody. And as optometry was starting to change, as I was coming out or going into getting ready to go into optometry school, it became a lot more apparent that this was going to be a great profession that was going to evolve and become something fantastic, which it already was, but now it's even more so.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. Awesome story. Well, something that I wanted to circle back to was the topic of rural optometry. I have the opportunity and the blessing to work with a lot of students. And a lot of students are always intrigued about rural optometry, but they don't really know what that looks like. And they get nervous because they don't know if they're going to have an opportunity to partner with someone if they decide to go into an area and work with that doctor. So I'd love to, just have you kind of paint the picture of what rural optometry looks like. And then also I'd love to know what you look for when you're looking for an associate or a partner, because the students that are listening to this podcast or tuning in, they want to prepare themselves to be successful before they get out of school. So we can kind of really, walk down that path and see what that really looks like, if you don't mind, Ted.
Yeah. As far as rural eye care, it is, in my opinion, of course, um, probably the most boiled down version of what an optometrist really should be. And the reason I say that is because I hear all the time when I do talks to students as well, and they say,
Yeah.
"Oh, I want to go into practice and do everything I've learned in school." And I said, "Great, where are you going to do that?" And they talk about some big city, and I said, "Well, there's a challenge with that because there's somebody in that community who does one of those things better than anybody else in the world, and right next door to him is a lady who does something else that's best at it than anybody else in the world. So you better be really good at one thing and one thing only if you're going to one of those big cities, if you're going to truly make a name for yourself."
Yeah.
Whereas in a small town, we have the luxury of kind of doing it all. I mean, I don't know what's going to walk in the door a lot of times with our pathology. I don't know when our urgencies and emergencies, what those are going to look like. It's, chemical splashes, it's foreign bodies, it's getting nailed in the face with a bungee cord trying to, attach a bunch of stuff to the top of the truck. I
Yeah.
mean, we get some really crazy things. I had a colleague of mine, in fact, a real good friend of mine here in town. He and I actually teach Sunday school together, and we sort of rotate back and forth. And he calls me up one Sunday afternoon after like late in the evening, and he said, "Hey, I've got a little bit of eye pain." I said, "What happened?" He says, "Well, I was fishing, and my fishing line got caught up in the tree, and I yanked it back, and it popped me in the eye, and it just really kind of hurts." Well, He didn't tell the whole story. When I got to the office, part of his iris was sticking out through his cornea because actually he had been punctured with a hook.
Oh my.
Yeah. And he was a whole lot bigger man than I would. I think I would have been screaming and rolling on the ground at this point. But fortunately, with the relationship I had with an ophthalmologist here, I could call him up and said, look, this guy really needs a lot more help than I can give him, but being able to be there, stand in the gap for that guy and get him to the right guy and get taken care of that day versus waiting, who knows how long it would be, was helpful. But we get to see it all. I mean, from macular degeneration, glaucoma, diabetes, we're treating all this stuff, and we get to see a great variety of things. The other thing that's really nice about being in a small town is, like I said earlier, you get to be well known. You become sort of a superstar in the area. And I'm not trying to say this in a braggy kind of way at all, but you see generations of people. I'm probably starting in on to seeing third generations of people at this point. I've had seen parents when I first came to town who brought their kids now have gotten married and they're having kids. And that's what my practice looks like. And when I'm looking for someone, you had asked, I'm looking for somebody who wants to be involved in a community, who wants to go out and get to know people and doesn't mind bumping into somebody at Publix, and having them say, hey, doc, do you remember the other day? Hey, yeah, hang on a second. Let me pull your chart out of my back pocket. But I mean, almost that what it feels like, but just to have that same kind of connection to them and say, I want to do what I can do to help out. I don't have your answer right now, but I'm going to pick up my phone and I'm going to put myself a note, and Monday morning, we're going to give you a call and get it taken care of, because they do literally stop you around town and talk about those kind of things. And what better way to build a practice than being just visible all the time? And I think, again, my opinion, I think it's got to be a little more challenging to do something like that in Atlanta, for instance. Unless you're really involved in your neighborhood community things or school or things like that, it's going to be a little more challenging.
Yeah. Well, no, I love these answers, and I want to kind of go in two directions with this, right? Because they both kind of overlap. Number one, I really want to touch on, the importance of networking, right? Because everything that you just stated really revolves around networking in your community, probably with your other healthcare professionals, knowing who does what, great at what. How important or how has that really helped to elevate your brand and your practice in general, especially being in a small town? I mean, you said everyone knows everyone, but just because you know someone doesn't mean that they're going to go to you. So how have you utilized your network to create more value to your practice?
Well, I mean, I may have said euphemistically, everybody knows everybody. It's not quite that simple, but I mean, you get the picture. I mean, I do know, you probably know as many people as I do. It's just a matter of they're all concentrated in one sort of place. But the one thing that you have to do is you have to be involved with that guest's care. And I'm going to use the word guest reflexively for patient or customer or whatever you want to call them. That's just my word. You can use whatever word you want to use. But with our guest, we're making sure that we're making contact back with their doctors on a regular basis through a letter, if requires a phone call. Every single guest that comes out of our exam room has a letter sent back to their doctor for every single visit, short of a corneal health evaluation where they're just coming in to make sure their contact lenses are working out okay. I mean, if they're coming in with eye infection, they get a letter. If they're coming in for their glaucoma check, they get a letter. If they're coming in for their visual health exam, they get a letter. And that kind of thing, it means something to the doctors that we're sending it to. And it seems crazy. People think, oh no, that can't be the truth. That's got to bother them. That's got to be a pain. It really isn't, because this is the one thing that our brethren in ophthalmology isn't really doing. They aren't sending a lot of those letters. And part of it, I believe, is just through their training. It's not something they were really taught to really do.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, to have that bi-directional communication between you and the physician can really help elevate that patient experience and really help elevating the network realm as well. And with that being said, let's kind of jump into that patient experience, right? You call your patients guests. I mean, I would love to learn a little bit more about the secret sauce behind what Dr. Ted does in that exam lane and what he does in the community as well. So if you don't mind just maybe sharing some tips and some pearls in regards to how you elevate that patient experience in your practice?
Well, I mean, part of it goes back to just the terminology of calling them a guest. I mean, it puts that individual in the framework of someone that you're inviting to come in. It's not that I'm trying to wait for them to come to me. We're hopefully inviting them to come to see us. And we're trying to make them feel at home when they come into the office.
Gotcha.
We want them to feel like it's a part of themselves. I literally had a patient a couple of years ago who said to me, you know, I'm excited about coming here every year. I look forward to this visit every year. I'm thinking, why in the world would you look forward to coming in and getting an eye exam? You know, but see, that's the mentality I have. The way she was framing it, and she went on, she said, I just get a chance to really get well taken care of. Y'all are nice. You know, you talk to me like I'm somebody. There's not a lot of big words that get thrown around. Everything gets explained. And the one thing that you always do, and when she says you, she's not just talking about me, she's talking about everybody in the office, is you at the very end say, what other questions do you have? And then you wait, you know, for the answer. And it's not just like whatever questions you have. Okay, great, let's go. And that means something to people.
Yeah. No, I feel you. And you know, one thing that I would love to learn a little bit more, because I agree with you 100% with communication. You know, that's the key. If you can communicate with your patients, you can have the world. If you can answer their questions, you can have the world. If you put them on a pedestal, you can have whatever you want. But, you know, it's one thing for Dr. Ted to say it. It's another thing for your team members to say it in the office. How are you getting your team members to buy in to the same mentality, the same mindset that you actually have? That way that when the patients come in and they're done seeing you, they still get that same experience all across the board.
Part of it is taking these stories that these guests are giving us and repeating it back to the team, especially when it involves one of them specifically. You know, like if, for instance, I'll give you a good example. So and part of it also is team selection, and if you remind me, we'll go back to that.
Yeah.
But if there's someone who's had a great experience and they let me know, I want to make sure that everybody in my team knows that someone was given a great experience by somebody specifically on the team. We had a lady one time who came into the office. She had a retinal detachment. She was probably in her mid 70s. She was someone who lived alone. And I'm talking to her about this retinal detachment. And one of my team members, Helen, was in the exam room as I'm explaining everything, because I'm going to get Helen to go and set the appointment up for this lady that needs to be seen by the ophthalmologist or the retinologist about 45 minutes away. And this lady has this just almost look of terror on her face. I've just told her about the retinal detachment and all the other bad things. She gets this look of terror on her face when I tell her I'm sending her 45 minutes away. And I'm not picking up on this, but Helen's watching her. And she says, ma'am, is there a problem? She goes, well, yeah, I have no way to get there.
Oh, wow.
And Helen goes, Dr. McElroy, can I take her? And I said, yeah. That's the kind of people I get to work with every day.
Yeah.
You know, and the reason why I get to work with them is because I don't, this is going to go back to the question you asked. How do you get your team to do it? You don't get them to do it. You get them first already doing it.
Gotcha.
That's got to be baked into their DNA. You can't teach it to them. It has to be part of who they are before they get there. Gotcha. And I have been blessed enough to find these individuals and hopefully on occasion smart enough to keep myself away from some of the other ones that weren't that. We've had something as simple as I had a guest one time. It was just flooding. I mean, absolutely biblical. It seemed like you could hear it really loud on the roof. And this lady comes in my exam room and she's sitting in the chair and she's wet, like from the knees down.
Oh, wow.
And she goes, you will not believe what your employee Colette is doing. And you know, when something like that starts off, you think, oh, this is not going to go well. And she said she is walking out to every car that pulls up with an umbrella and taking them into the office.
Oh, wow.
Nobody told her to do that.
Wow.
But, you know, to hear something like that, that's massive. And I mean, I can't tell you, I'm almost as proud as a parent to hear something like that. From my team.
Oh, yeah.
You always know you got really great people, but it sure is nice to hear it from somebody else.
Oh, yeah. It's no doubt about it. And, you know, I love what you said. You know, that they should already be doing this. They're already doing this, and you know, they're popping up. But at the same time, Ted, you know, it's one thing to, you know, they're already doing it, but it's another thing when they go to your business that they continue to do it. I mean, that's a reflection of who you are as a leader in your office. It's a reflection of the culture in the office. It's a reflection of what's done on a daily basis. Because a lot of times we can find people that are great, but if they go into a culture or an office where there's not good culture, or you know, there's not good energy in the office, you know, they're going to start to follow that same path. So I think it's also a big reflection of you, the leader in the office, as well.
Well, you know, also, Daryl, it's truly important too to find these right people to bring into your culture, because every time you bring someone into your culture, part of their culture becomes your culture.
Oh, that was a
And
good one right there.
I mean, it really, I mean, think about it. You get influenced by all sorts of people, and me
Absolutely.
too. You know, it's,
Absolutely.
you know, if I bring somebody in my team that's going to end up taking us in the wrong direction, I'm still going to get influenced by it. It might be just the stress of having to deal with this guy that just hasn't quite got it going on,
Yeah.
or maybe he is causing some turmoil with one of my other team. Maybe he's the kind of person that tends to say, "Ooh, let me tell you a little bit something about what's going on over here." You know, instead of coming and telling me about it, they're talking
Right.
about it with everybody else.
Right.
So you've got to be very careful at who you bring in to your practice. And it's kind of like, you know, having a spouse. I mean, and I wouldn't want to take anybody home to my parents that I wasn't prepared to potentially marry one day. You know, I want someone sitting in my office that's going to take care of my parents the same way I would take care of my parents.
Yeah.
And I guess that's how I try to do that.
I love it. I mean, we're getting a lot of love here, man. Tony, you know, he's another great, brilliant mind in eye care. Just quotable. Part of
Tony
the
is a very brilliant. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I mean, this is. I think we might need to put this one on the shirt, Ted. I really love this one, man. This was great. This is probably my highlight so far of our conversation, and getting some thumbs up out there. So you're getting some love, man. This is great. This is great. You know, one thing that I really also wanted to dig in today is the one thing that I really love about you, man, is that you are always making yourself better, right? You're always continuously learning. You're making yourself better personally, but also professionally. And you're always doing that. Every time I talk to you, you're coming back from some type of symposium or some type of masterclass or something that's going to just make you better all around. Where did this come from? How did you even get started with this mindset? Is this something that as a child, your parents instilled in you as core values, something of continuous education, continuous learning? Where did this come from? And if you don't mind, just maybe sharing some of, you know, some of your best experiences in regards to continuously to learn over time.
Well, one thing, my dad has been a continuous learner. I was the very first college graduate in my family. You know, and I went straight past that right on into the other thing. And I was thinking, you know, what am I thinking? Who am I to do something like this in the first place? But my dad has always been very curious. Had he had different circumstances, I have no doubt he might have ended up somewhere else. And thank God he didn't, because I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you right now. But the the experience that I got from him was, it takes some investment in yourself, and it takes some investment in time. Now, one of the things that he does really well that I don't do very well, and I'm probably going to have the entire city of Tifton charge into my door in a moment and call me a heretic, but I'm not. And here it comes. I'm not really a big fan of reading. Reading for me is tough. Now, I love listening. I can listen to a book all day long, and I will tell you like verbatim what happened with it. But for reading, it's a little challenging for me. So I do a lot of my learning, like, you know, you will go get, you know, Made to Stick by Dan and Chip Heath. I'll get the audiobook of it and listen to it. And those kind of things are where I get a lot of I listen to a ton of podcasts, you know, from all sorts of variety things. I think it's really important that we look outside our profession for a lot of the lessons that we get.
Yes.
Not to knock anything that we're doing. I mean, we've got some really, truly brilliant people in our profession that I would not be here had it not been for them. And I get to stand on their shoulders. But if we stay in this hairball of optometry our entire lives, we're never going to really truly grow. So it's important that we're seeing, pardon me, what happens in other industries, whether it's airlines, hotels, entertainment. I'm a huge Disney fan, not just because I love the thing, but it's the experience. I sit around. I am such a goober. I will go up to a cast member and say, "So why is it that you come into work every day? What is it that makes you want to come back?" There's a guy that works in Tomorrowland. His name is John. He's been working
Okay.
there since my kids were, I guess the first time I took them when they were 18 months old.
Oh, wow.
So much so that I recognize this guy. I mean, that's how much I see. And we go a lot. So we're only at 4 hours away. So we go, 3 or 4 times a year. But he's that recognizable, and he's not so much recognizable just because of what he looks like, but because of his attitude.
Right.
I mean, this is the kind of guy who, for no apparent reason, just will grab a bottle full of bubbles and is blowing bubbles out in the middle of the crowd as they're all running past, and he's waving and high-fiving everybody, and he's really having a good time at work. And
Yeah.
he's probably not making, $100,000, $200,000 a year. He's
Right.
probably making below 50. But you'd think he got paid $1 million that day.
Yeah.
And seeing that kind of stuff just rubs off on you. So trying to put myself in those circumstances, again, like bringing the right people in your team,
Sure.
rubs off on you. And I most often believe that I'm not going to keep getting what I've been getting by keep doing what I've been doing.
Mm. Say that one more time, man. Say it one more time so it can really resonate with our listeners today, because that was a strong statement.
I'm not going to keep getting what I've been getting if I keep doing what I've been doing.
Amen. Amen.
That can come from exercise. I've got a fitness coach who is virtual, and once a month she completely changes my exercise routine. So for the first week every month, I'm sore. By the end of the month, I'm not. So she changes it again, and I continue to grow. I continue to get some benefit out of it, because if you keep doing that same thing, your body gets efficient and you stop getting the benefit out of the exercises that you're doing. Same thing happens with your brain. Same things happens with your attitudes. It's no different.
And the same thing with patient care.
Exactly.
If you continue to do the same thing in the office and you don't change with times, change with innovation, change with the patients, change with the demographics, then you're not doing that patient or that guest service. You're doing them a disservice. So you really have to be able to do exactly what you're saying, man.
I wish I could give credit to the person who told me this one time, but it's been the one thing that's always to my mind. But I'll ask you the same question. Hey, Darryl, when's the last time you heard one of your guests say, "You know what I really miss? That pink pump-up chair that they had. I really miss that office."
Well, you know what? The crazy thing is this. I always ask myself, how many patients are saying that about the phoropter that's in our exam room?
Right.
How many patients are saying that about the way that exam lane looks?
Exactly.
How many patients are saying that, when they leave your practice and they see maybe a competitor doing something virtually, or, just more marketing and brand awareness of various things? I mean, we can't be stuck in the past. We can't be dinosaurs. We really have to evolve. We really have to accept innovation, and we really have to look at that person that's in front of us, that guest, and make sure that we are truly helping them to live their best life and elevating that patient care on a day-to-day basis. So, man, I'm with you 100%. You have to be able to change. You have to be able to mobilize your team members to elevate that experience when they're in the office. And you can't keep just doing the same things anymore. Times have changed tremendously.
Yeah. And the reason I was worried about the city of Tifton barging into my door when I said I don't like to read is because Tifton is the reading capital of the world.
Oh, I didn't know that. Interesting.
That's our moniker. Yeah.
Okay.
About probably 15 years ago, there's probably something, I'm trying to remember the name of it. Accelerated Reader is the program. And our community was one of the first ones in the country that accepted this thing. Kids get like points, and they get all this stuff. They can buy little things at the Accelerated Reader store. And so I guess it was one Thursday, it was when we all decided, well, when our community decided this is how it was going to work out, they had this big reading thing, and we supposedly set a Guinness Book of World Record of the most people reading the same thing at the same time out loud. We had our entire football stadium. Everybody read a Dr. Seuss paragraph together.
No way.
But that was to celebrate the fact that we had collected 1 million accelerated reader points, and no community had ever done that before. And so when we did that, that's when we declared ourselves the reading capital of the world.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, I'm gonna put you on a little game of something that I do. I don't mind reading books, but I'm like you. I like to listen. So I do a lot of podcasts. I do a lot of audio, and one of my colleagues actually put me on to this. And I don't do it for everything, but I do it for quite a bit of audio that I listen to. I play it on 2x, and it allows me to consume more information in a short time. And that's my colleague, Dr. Adam Ramsey. I got to give him a shout out to that. So that's how I'm able to consume a lot of information. And what I'll end up doing is I'll listen to these books on, Audible or a podcast. And if it's a book, I'll listen to it, but then I'll buy the book and put it on my shelf. That way I can always go back and reference it. Or I'll buy a book first, and then I'll go look at my shelf and say, oh man, I need to go get that on Audible so that I can listen to it as well. So it's kind of like a reminder on both ends. But I'm with you 100% when it comes to, I like to read, but for me, it's more articles online, something on my phone. But I love to also be able to listen to something because I can process it better than actually sitting down and reading word for word. That's just me personally. Yeah.
And I don't know if you can see this or not, but let's see, where is it? That's the speed that all my podcasts are.
Oh, 1.5. My man. Great minds think alike there.
That's right. It's gotten to the point now, though, that I listen to so many at that speed. When I slow them down to 1, they sound like they're talking. Like
I know. And it gets annoying, right? It's just like, what is going on here?
But meanwhile, when I listen to my podcast at 1.5 speed, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, you're talking real fast. You can't wears me out.
Yep. My wife, one day I was sitting in my office, and she came in, and I had a podcast going, or a book. I can't remember which one it was. And she's like, what are you listening to? Is that the Chipmunks? I was like, no, that's a podcast. It's have it on 2x, baby. It's just relax. It's okay. I can understand what's going on here.
So real quick, I want to turn the table on you like you did on me. So what are your top 3 podcasts that you listen to?
Woo, great question. One of them that I really love is Entree Leader.
Yes.
That is a great one. Great information. Just always has fantastic guests, and I just love the explanation of the guests as well. My other one would be I have a church that I go to here that I'm looking to join. So it's a pastor, and I always like to listen to Pastor Andy Thompson. Whenever I can't make it into church, and I haven't been going in because we're doing it virtually now. So that's my other go-to. And then the John Maxwell Leadership Podcast. John Maxwell to me is a rock star. I mean, I sit down and I listen to this guy, and I'm like, how can one person be blessed with this much knowledge? I mean, he has all the right answers for all the right scenarios and everything. So those are probably my top 3 that I listen to on a regular basis. Now, I'm going to give you, I guess you could say, the answer that I should have said for number 1. The number 1 podcast that I listen to is Defocus Media, the number 1 optometry podcast in eyecare.
Very good. Very good.
But I got another one. You want to know the other one?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, here, let's do this, because this is actually a fantastic segue into what you're doing. You have a podcast, the Vision of Leadership Podcast with Ted McElroy. So I would love to talk about this in a little more detail, because as I mentioned at the top of the show, you're a leader, and you really do a lot of research in leadership. You really have, coaches for different things, and you take this seriously because you understand the importance of leadership and also teaching others to be leaders. So if you don't mind giving us a little background of, what this podcast is all about, how long you've been doing it, maybe some of the guests and some of the topics that you actually cover.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun for one thing. Had you on there a couple weeks ago. Hopefully we're going to drop that in the next week or 2. That's the one thing I don't have the ability to do is control when everybody comes out. That's all Dr. Chris Wolf, and it's actually his platform, and that's where everything's running. So this is how it kind of came about. I had thought about doing a podcast for a while because I love podcasting. And I thought, God, what cool thing would that to be to sit down and just talk with people and find out
Yeah,
what's going on in their brain and just pick their brain. I mean, it just sounded
yeah.
like a lot of fun. And the other thing that was really good for me, which no one is getting to see on this particular thing, is I have to force myself into not talking. I have to force myself to ask a question and then shut up and listen. And I don't do that very well. And I've become way better at listening after doing this. And even going back to the first episode that I ever did, uh, she was so gracious to let me do that. And I don't know that Millie even knew that was the first one, but my very first person was Millie Knight.
Oh, nice.
And
Great guess.
yeah, very good way to start off with a bang.
Absolutely.
And it was a really good beginning point for me, and that would have been 2 years ago.
Okay.
But I had gotten into it because Chris had this podcast he was doing. He started off really just doing it for all us administrators for Vision Source. And then he changed it one day. He sort of started talking to somebody else that was outside of Vision Source altogether. And it was kind of a, hey, wait a minute, and then he interviewed Mick Kling, one of my classmates, and a guy that's in my study group. And then he interviewed Mike Rothschild, another guy in my study group. And I'm thinking, wow, okay, I'm kind of jealous that I didn't start this now. And now I feel like it's kind of the bus has left the station. So I called up Chris and I said, hey, I just want to tell you, I really admire what you're doing. I think it's amazing. And I'm kind of jealous that I didn't think of doing it. And I'm not going to do it now because I feel like I was kind of stepping on your toes. And he goes, why would you think that? He said, you could just, there's plenty to go around for everybody. Do this. He says, as a matter of fact, why don't you just do some with me?
Yeah.
And I said, all right, so what would it take? And he sent me a little folder with some information about, how to get my computer hooked in and what kind of software to do and the right microphone and all these other little things to do. I mean, it wasn't terribly expensive. And he said, I'll take care of, you do the engineering. I'll take care of putting it all in there for you. And we'll just see how it goes. And if you want to do it for a while, great. If you decide you're tired of it, that's fine too. And I love it,
Awesome.
and my direction went more into talking with, I say about 50-50, 50% optometry and 50% everybody outside of optometry.
Gotcha.
And part of that is just because of some of the relationships that I have built with different people through some of these coaching situations that I'm in with Business Accelerator with Michael Hyatt, with getting to know somebody who knew somebody else who knew somebody, and now I'm friends with that guy kind of thing. And these are people who it's just, I'm still floored that I'm having people like this talk to me. I really, truly am. I mean, because it's just to give me an hour of your time for one thing, but the lessons that I get to have out of it and the deep conversations that pop out of some of these things, it's really amazing how quickly and how deep you end up going with some of these conversations and the things that you learn. And just to have one tidbit to come away with it makes it all worthwhile.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm with you 100% on that one. Tell me this, Ted, if you could have one guest that you have not been able to interview yet outside of optometry, just, whoever you want to in the entire world, regardless of if they're alive or not here, who would be that one guest?
Well, I've got a lot of them, but I'll tell you one that popped in my mind first when you said it. I don't know how in the world I would even, actually, I do know how I could potentially get this lady. Her name is Fawn Weaver. Does that name ring a bell for you at all?
No.
So Fawn Weaver was a Wall Street Journal writer, I believe, either Wall Street Journal or New York Times. And she had heard this story about a gentleman named Nearest Green. Nearest Green was the former slave who taught Jack Daniels how to be Jack Daniels. Yes, he was the one that taught he taught the Lynchburg process of how to coal filter the whiskey to turn it into Tennessee whiskey the way it was. And he started out this process, and she found this story out, and she just wanted to know more about it. So she and her husband took a vacation to Lynchburg, Tennessee, to go to the library to dig into this story. And the more she dug into it, the more interested she got. And then after like her second day, she's there at the library. This man just shows up at the library, and he is one of the Daniels family. And he's like, I hear you're digging into our family. And she goes, well, yeah, I just think the story is very intriguing. And I want to be able to tell the story in the right way. I want to be able to tell it the way it should be told. And I would love to hear your side of things too. And so she comes away with this story, and she's enthralled that not only did this relationship of the two families continue on, their families still are very, very close, the Greens and the Daniels. And I'm probably butchering the story terribly, but what turns out to be, this is the incredible part. Fawn ends up deciding that not only is she so intrigued by the story, that she actually wants to start a distillery of her own, and she wants to honor Nearest Green, and she comes out with the label Uncle Nearest whiskey. Now, both of these whiskeys are made in Shelby County, Tennessee. Not Shelby County, excuse me, in Shelbyville, near Shelbyville, Tennessee, which is over near Nashville, and around Murfreesboro area. They're both becoming world-renowned whiskeys. They have a working relationship. They have kind of different markets. Of course, Jack Daniels, everybody's heard of that. But Uncle Nearest is becoming this sort of boutique brand that's taken the world by storm. And just to hear her story and get to ask her the questions, it would be an incredible experience for me to be able to do that. And I know possibly who I potentially could talk to get me in, but it's one of those things you kind of got to be careful about what kind of favors you ask for, because you don't want to wear out your welcome with someone, and you don't want to put somebody in a bad situation where they think, oh, well, that's the only reason I'm here is because they're, and I don't think this guy would, but I'm going to have to save that one for a, hey, I really need a favor kind of thing.
Gotcha. Well, man, this has been great. I would love to ask you one last question here. What legacy do you want to leave on eyecare?
That's a great question. I think that you and I talked about this a couple weeks ago, and part of it was there's always been this thought of, private practice or corporate practice. And enough to go around for everybody. I believe that this is an abundant society. This is an abundance world. God's given us so much. There's so many resources. We couldn't possibly run out of resources, but in our world, we always treat it the other way. And I guess for me, I would like to be the one that was part of that did help continue on what private practice was supposed to be for, why it was important. Not that corporate practice is not important, and not that private practice is more important. It's just the way that I practice. And I would hope that I've, if nothing else, left a legacy that my son, when he graduates from optometry school, would have that opportunity to continue on with that. And if I do that just for one person, that's going to be plenty for me.
Awesome. Well, I love it, man. And I just want to say thank you so much for hanging out with me today. This has been really, really exciting, really just a lot of fun. And again, anytime I have the opportunity to just sit down and have a conversation with you, I take full advantage of it. And I just want to say thank you again. For everyone that wants to learn more about rural optometry or hear more about leadership, check out the podcast with Ted. I mean, the Vision of Leadership podcast, it's amazing. He's always dropping great knowledge, great stories, just great education in general. Ted is a great resource for eye care. To me, he is the definition of optometry, because that's his blueprint. It's in his DNA. And you can see it with, the boards that he's on, the work that he does with SECO, the work that he does with fighting for optometry rights, whether it's, protecting our current rights or expanding our scope. This is a great role model to follow in eye care. But thank you again, Ted, man. This has been fantastic, and I look forward to doing this again.
My pleasure, Darryl, and I can't wait until we're actually sitting in the same room together.
I know. I'm looking forward to it. Well, thank you again. It's your favorite optometrist, Dr. Darryl Glover. Everyone have a fantastic Friday. Stay healthy, stay positive, and stay blessed. Until next time, peace.